The elites haven't really, they've got their druthers, and they're not totally in control. They have a huge amount of power. They have a huge amount of power, but they're not in control. This game is like a roulette wheel that's spinning, and no one's in control right now.
Well, hello, friends. Thanks so much for pushing play. We're going to have a bright, sunshiny, happy video for once. Dissecting reality is not always a bummer. Look, the bankers run the show. Trump won the presidency. Does he report to the bankers, or is he going to start to bring the bankers in line? Lots of different theories, and I have Dr. Schoon back on the line to help me digest all of it. Darryl, how are you?
How are you, Sean? Good to be here.
Well, I'm glad to have you. Welcome back. Hey, I just wanted to start with a piece of news, if I may.
Sure.
All right, guys. So everyone is well aware that there were anti-Trump protests in New York City and around the country. All sorts of angry young people. I wonder how many of them are actual producers with jobs, but all sorts of angry people in the streets. So do you guys remember Scott Fauvel, the DNC Clinton asset and former field director of Americans United for Change, who was exposed by Project Veritas for helping stage protests and disrupt Trump rallies? He's essentially a mercenary. Well, as we previously reported, Scott Fauvel did not take his termination very well. He was fired after the Project Veritas expose. He immediately took to Twitter to expose the enemy's operations, and he hasn't stopped tweeting since. You may have seen this on my website, but I'll read just a couple of these tweets regarding the anti-Trump protests in New York City. Scott writes, "Pro tip. When staging a paid protest against Trump, try not to use the same black and yellow signs you used for Mike Brown and Freddie Gray." Here's another. "Funny thing about Robert Kramer is he keeps a black and yellow sign over his desk." And then he wrote, "How odd, the signs that hashtag Trump protest are just like the ones hanging in Kramer's office and also used at Mike Brown and Freddie Gray." So guys, how much of this is Soros-infused, DNC-fostered rabble-rousing? One must wonder. Darryl, what do you make of this Trump presidency?
This is an amazing event, all right? I mean, extraordinary. This is an extraordinary event. But that said, Sean, I think the chances of good coming out of it, I mean, ultimate good, are 20% to 80% the other way. And this is why. Unless you know your enemy, the chances of you winning are zero. All right? The chances, unless you know your enemy, your true enemy, the chances of you winning are zero. Now, Trump is an incredibly systemic disruptor, and it's extraordinary because the system needed to be more than disrupted. It needs to be replaced, all right? And Trump is the first sign of that we have seen, all right? I'm one of the most cynical people in this country, if not on the planet, for two things. One, I don't really have a high regard for human nature. I know people have good hearts, all right? But their ability to see things and their ability to be manipulated is extraordinary, and especially given the power of the media and the powers that be that they're arrayed against. The powers of the bankers is extraordinary, all right? And it started with money, and one of my little sarcastic sayings is that when politicians can be leased and bought and sold, your ability to print money is phenomenal. Well, what happened this time was this, is that Trump's disruption threw out the money on both sides of the aisle. One advertently, the other one inadvertently, all right? The bankers' home party has always been the Republicans since the beginning. Wall Street has owned the Republican Party, and the Bushes are an example of this, all right? George Bush Jr., and George Bush's father, Prescott Bush, all right? And I mean, if you go up and Google Prescott Bush and overthrowing the United States government, you will find, Sean, that in 1933, Prescott Bush, one of the elite boys in New York, money boys, when Roosevelt took power and took away the gold, and I'm not saying that's a good thing, it was a terrible thing that they did, all right? But Prescott and the rich boys were so upset at what happened, they decided to raise an army and overthrow Roosevelt. Now that's treason, all right? I don't care what point of view on that constitutes treason, all right? And the reason how it got found out was he went to Smedley Butler, all right? Smedley Butler was, and I don't know if he still is, but he was at the time the highest decorated military man in the history of the United States. And as an aside, Smedley is a classic example of what happens when you want to rebel against your parents. Smedley Butler's parents were Quakers. All right? Quakers, Sean. Smedley became a Marine and the highest decorated Marine in the history of the United States. So Prescott and his rich boys, the corporate boys, went to Smedley and told him of their plan. I mean, here's a guy. He's loyal. He's highly decorated. They knew who he was, and they went to him and said, "This is what we want to do. This is a horrible thing that Roosevelt has done. We want to raise an army, and you're going to be the head of it." Well, what Smedley did is he went to the government, went to the Congress, and ratted out Prescott Bush. They had a commission to find out what happened, and they found out what basically Smedley said was true. What happened was they buried it. They buried it. All right? Nothing happened to Prescott. Nothing happened to the rich boys. They just shut the whole damn thing down. And if you go up on the web, they've even sort of scrubbed it out of what's going on. You'll find evidence of it. And I ran into this 10 years ago when BBC did a documentary on it. And over the course of years, I go back and check on it, and you can see the whitewash beginning to happen. This is not something the elites want to know. So the Bushes ran. They are the boys. They're the bankers. All right, they are the bankers. Now, what happened is Trump came along, all right, and blew out the money on the Republican side. I mean, these boys were loaded for bear. I mean, they had all the money in the game. They print the shit, all right. And they were rolling in. They figured that Jeb was, they got this next one was going to go in. And Trump came in and dumped out the money. What happened is the system boys were then without a vote in their own party that they had owned. They owned that party lock, stock, and barrel. They played the Big Tent thing with the disaffected Americans, but these people are the core. Corporate America and the bankers were the core of the Republican Party. They got dumped out when Americans realized they were getting burned by those in control. That they had voted constantly, sort of like Lucy in the football, with Lucy in the foot every Thanksgiving, Charlie Brown puts the football up, and he pulls it away. She falls on her butt. Finally, Lucy goes. She turned into it. Said, "Fuck you. This is it. I've had it. I don't care. I'm not going to do this again," and roared after the party, and the money was gone. All right. Now, what happened is you saw Bush. These boys take power and wealth seriously. Okay, faced with voting for Trump, who's a Republican, who's taken over the party. All right, not he has taken over the party. He's become their nominee. There's a big difference, and we're going to see what the difference is in there. Okay, infrastructure, voting, stuff like that. You saw George W. Bush voting for Hillary Clinton. Now, why? Because in the event of a systemic disruptor, and these boys, they own the system. So when you own the system and a disruptor comes along, you can't deal with them. So Trump disrupted their power in their party and went to Hillary Clinton. Now, where were the Clintons? Okay, the Clintons had always played the weak party. The Democrats had always played the supporting role or the weak role, or apparently antagonist to the power of the Republican bankers and the military-industrial complex. All right, they were always they were never in control. They were always the outsiders trying to get control. All right, and then when the 60s came along and everything started changing in this country, the core of the Democratic Party, which had been the Dixiecrats, who hated the Republicans from New York with all their soul because of the Civil War, they hated them. That's when you got these people stayed in power. They elected that's where the term limits thing came in, because those boys in the South, the Dixiecrats, stayed in all their life. The hatred of the Republican movement was so intense, they stayed in all their life. Well, what happened when the 60s came along and change started happening in this country, and you got women's rights, you got civil rights going up, the Dixiecrats, who were from the South, got so flipped out what was going on because the Democrats welcomed them in. They were courted by the Republicans. All right, that's when Bush and the Money Boys. That's how Bank of America ended up in Charlotte, North Carolina. That's how Bush, that little twerpy, Connecticut-raised family, ends up with a Texas accent because they sent the money down to the South to bring the disaffected Dixiecrats into the fold. Because I tell you, it is a feat of magic that the 1% can rule in a democracy.
Well, let me jump in because I 100% agree. And, the Texas Bush family, the good old boys, that's all part of a play. That's all part of the mystique because they're Yale boys. They're East Coast money. They're old money. The Prescott Bush.
Skull and Bones.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was going to say because you have John Kerry on one side when he was running for president, Skull and Bones. You have Bush on the other side, Skull and Bones. Neither of them can talk about it, and it's the same thing we were getting with this election.
Yes.
You have a choice of a shit sandwich. Would you like to vote for Clinton or would you like to vote for Jeb Bush or Ted Cruz? We didn't get the Jeb Bush or Ted Cruz. We got the disruptor Donald Trump. But here's my question. Are we being duped? Is Trump going to do what he says or what he said he will do? We need to hold his feet to the fire so that we don't all end up looking like complete, total idiots. Because he had a lot of support from a lot of us in the alt media because we all despised Hillary Clinton and we understand her hardcore crimes, which the people protesting, by the way, in New York City do not understand. They probably haven't read the WikiLeaks, and if they have, then they don't care about her criminality. Then they're intellectually dishonest or morally bankrupt.
Those people, the thing in New York. It has just recently come to light, and I think it's through WikiLeaks, not through but through Zero Hedge, that the person in charge, I think his name was Michael Froman, in charge of staffing Obama's cabinet, okay, in the 2008 presidency, was he was Wall Street boy. Okay, and that's why they put Eric Holder in there. Eric Holder, the black attorney general, his position, and it's not easy to be black in Wall Street. All right, it's a white boy's game. All right, and here's this guy. He's black. He works for a Covington company, which is the litigation firm that represents Wall Street banks. He is put in as the attorney general after the greatest financial scandal in this country. Okay,
and look at Rudy Giuliani. Is part of this administration the 9/11 cover-up artist?
Yes.
All right.
Okay. Very, very good. Sean, I like what you're seeing. This is because all of us are looking at this reality on Thursday. Okay, like, holy shit. Okay, we're looking at it. Okay, even the ones who wanted him or didn't want him are going, holy shit. The ones who wanted him didn't expect him, and the ones who thought Hillary was going to take it certainly didn't expect this. And everybody's going, well, what is going to happen? Why? Because we've got a disruptor in there, and the guy isn't. No one knows who he really is. His politics have always been obscure, okay? When he first came in as a disruptor, he came in, and this is what I'm saying. When I started this program, Sean, I said this statement, because this really means something. When you don't know who your enemy is, your chances of winning are zero. Donald Trump came in, and he played blame the Mexicans. All right? Now, I've been at this game a long time. And well, everybody has in a way, but I think I'm really serious about it, about politics and power and control. And I had come in my own little bizarre conclusion, it was the banks. It was that little cadre of people who Woodrow Wilson confided after he had been duped by the banksters into signing the Federal Reserve Act in 1913. They promised him the League of Nations, and they yanked it away, all right? And after it was Woodrow Wilson, desperate for, quote, peace, and, given up the thing, and he said, this country is run by a very group of small men, all right, who don't answer to the people, all right? I read somewhere that in the 1920s, that same group of people were consolidating power. The industrialists started looking at trying to control the media. So they had a study done of the media, and they realized they already controlled it. Okay? I mean, power coalesces, especially in empires. All right? And the longer an empire is in existence, the more coalesced those elites become. What we had then was a charade of playing one side against the other. My metaphor about American politics since World War II has been like you've got this ocean liner moving, all right? And it's heading in a direction, and the bankers are up in the steering wheel at the top, okay? So what they do, they have a thing called an election every 4 years, and everybody down in steerage gets the vote. that's a weird thing about a democracy. If they had their way, there'd be no vote. But kings got dumped out, and now the bankers came in, and everybody gets the vote. So every 4 years they have a vote. All right, and so what they do in the classic way of all empire. This came from the Latin sayings, divide and conquer. Divide and conquer. You go in and you split people up, and you have them fighting against each other. All right. And so my metaphor on American politics since World War II has been this ship, this enormously powerful ship, wealthy ship, owned by the bankers, is heading exactly where the bankers want. And every 4 years, it tilts either to the right, which is what the bankers want, and then every once in a while, it'll tilt to the left. Okay? All right? But either way, it's going in the same direction. Now, the people in steerage, the ones who vote, the ones who aren't up in the upper classes, the ones who aren't up in the suites, the ones who aren't up there at the top of the thing deciding where it goes, we're down there in the bottom. All right, I would say pretty much with 100% possibility, Sean, that the people listening to this are what we have in common. We're at the bottom. We're in steerage. Okay, we're in steerage. All right, and they've gotten the rest of the ship totally bananas at each other. I mean, enraged at each other. All right. The one thing that people in this country share, either on the left or the right, is that something is motherfucking wrong. All right. And what they both believe, it ain't them, it's the other ones who are why it's wrong. So the ones on the left side of the boat are enraged, okay? Because this is whipped up by the boys. You talk about conspiracy, they whip the division up, divide and conquer. And because life is not going in the way they want, even when they vote and win that little glimpse of that little rush of power, oh, we won, now it's going to be better, certainly goes back the same old way. On the other side, it's the same thing, except for the elites. The elites they've got their druthers, and they're not totally in control. They have a huge amount of power. But they're not in control too. This game is like a roulette wheel that's spinning, and no one's in control right now.
All right. Well, let me jump in. Yeah, and I wonder if that's true. There's been many people wondering if there are multiple factions, or at least two different opposing factions within the deep state that have been warring against each other. Joseph P. Farrell and Catherine Austin Fitts have that conversation frequently, and I really admire their views on it.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, and so and of course, our listeners are very familiar with the Hegelian dialectic divide and conquer strategy.
Yes.
And but let me just say one thing as it relates to Trump. The reason so many of us were interested in seeing him elected as opposed to the Wicked Witch is because of WikiLeaks and because of the well-known history of Clinton criminality. And because of WikiLeaks, we know of her overt treason, her blatant treason, her perjury, Benghazi, billions missing from the Clinton Foundation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's a litany of crimes too long to list. Now, standing in opposition to that was Trump, saying, look, if we want to have a nation, we need border control. If we want to have a constitution, we need justices on the Supreme Court who will respect the Constitution. If we want to have a nation, we need rule of law. These are very simple things that he was offering. Now, I hear the left say he had no platform. He offered no specifics. Well, I've heard him say Obamacare is bankrupting the middle class. We're going to have to do away with or fix somehow. So he has said specifics.
He has said things.
And the question now is, will he do the things he has said? Because everybody on the right is so damn relieved that the Wicked Witch of the West is now politically dead. So all of that said, do you think he will do any of the things he said, and will he actually give this nation a fighting chance at being great again? I guess you said 20% chance, yes, 80% no.
But this is not because of Trump. It's because of the disruption that he has caused. Okay? If it was up to Trump, you would be back down to zero. All right? Not zero, let's say 5%. His views, for example, regarding Israel, which is a banker-backed state.
Yeah.
All right. They made, England owed the Israelis, the Jews, a lot. All right, and paid and gave it back to them, and Israel is basically
It's a Rothschild state.
It's a Rothschild state.
Yeah, but to be clear, Clinton was a Rothschild candidate.
I understand that.
Friends with Evelyn de Rothschild and what's her name, Lady Rothschild.
Listen, I understand the Clintons. I mean, I have a deep, abiding distaste for them, but I have a deep, abiding distaste for everybody.
Well, and in fairness, some of our most highly regarded readers and commenters at SGT report saying Trump is in the same pocket.
No. Trump is in nobody's pocket. I realize he has just overthrown the system. All right? He really has. This guy, he's a huge real estate boy. Okay? And he really wasn't interested in politics. All right? But he was sort of a megalomaniac. He loves attention. He really craves attention. All right? And so he's rolling along, being who he is, all right? And he's a character. The guy's very flamboyant. And in fact, one of the first people to see him as his potential was Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton saw him on TV and wrote him. He said, you ought to think about politics. Okay? You ought to think about politics. He saw that this guy had some charisma, that thing of where people think you're going to take them to the promised land. All right? He's the guy, and Clinton saw that in Trump. All right? And now Clinton had it too, where people thought he was going to take them to the promised land. All right? And Reagan had it. Few people have this thing to capture the imagination. So this guy is very successful. His politics are all over the place. In fact, when he started coming, this is why the Republican hierarchy hated him, because they knew they didn't own him. He did not think like the elites. He did not think that we got to keep it a certain way. He was a Democrat on most of the issues, or not some of it. Birth control, all this stuff, abortion. He was all over the place. I mean, he had no what they call provenance, no real political provenance. Okay. And so how he got the stage, Sean, how he got the ticket to where he is today, which is a rather extraordinary feat, he went up and he said, it's the fucking Mexicans. Now, I've been watching this game a long time, and I want to tell you that I've never seen a Mexican take an American's job, really, that way, in a very systemic way. Our jobs went to China in 1998 after the United States let them into the World Trade Organization.
Well, he's certainly been saying that, too. He's had his eye on China. He's pointing not only the finger at Mexico, but China as well.
He's not wrong on a lot of things. But his core values are just about himself. Okay? He will switch sides. He will move around here. He will do whatever.
Yeah, but let me say something in fairness. Now, when he points the finger at Mexico, he was saying that because of news items that were coming out in the media, like Carrier Air Conditioning taking everything out of this country and moving their production down to Mexico.
Of course.
So are the motor companies,
okay,
right? If they're not going to China, these jobs are going to Mexico. So it's a fair point. And if these companies are going to do that, then when they bring this merchandise back into this country to sell it to the American people, he's going to put tariffs on it. Now, I don't know what that will ultimately do to the economy, but it might make some of these corporations give second thoughts to selling out their nation, the nation that gave them so much power to begin with.
Okay, now this is a very interesting thing to see, really how the game works in power. The reason the shipping over of American jobs began in the 1950s with the XM Bank, and this is okay. Now here you had U.S. corporations locked in a bloody life and death struggle with labor. All right, labor wanted more money. Corporations didn't want to pay them anything. All right, it's just zero sum. It's not a zero sum game. It's win lose. Okay, and so what happened is that and I want to tell you something. The strong middle class happened because of labor. It's because they fought for wage parity and they got it in the 50s and 60s. After that, they've gone to shit, and we're all poor. Most of us are poor now. But what happened is the corporations got the United States government to put together the XM Bank. All right, which he's against. And this is one of the good things against, okay? The XM Bank was there, and it told U.S. corporations, we are going to, if you put a plant up overseas and it gets taken over and nationalized by the country that you're in, we're going to pay you back dollar for dollar. Now, whose benefit was that? It was the corporations. They had that legislation put in so they could ship American, what we used to be American, they don't see it as American. They're just, it's profit and loss. To send jobs overseas, all right, so they can pay a cheaper wage. That's all it was about, is money. All right? And so that's where this game has been in the beginning. Now, Clinton, who comes along, he's supposed to be a friend of labor. He rolls in 1992 supporting NAFTA. Now, that is like Jimmy Falwell supporting the either Catholics or the Muslims. Anybody but a born-again Christian. All right? This is a betrayal of the American labor movement or working man who had a job. All right? And it was done there to break down the trade barriers under the guise of freedom. More tyranny has been sold in the name of freedom than I even want to go into.
Yeah, that's right. Well, and again, the Clintons linked to betrayal. What a shocker.
Yeah, they're part of the deal. They just sold their side out. Okay? They sold their side out. Now, let me tell you something that very few people know about immigration. When, as a part of NAFTA, one of the deals of, quote, free trade was that Mexico had tariffs against U.S. corn. All right? Why? Mexico is a very poor country, and they have a lot of indigenous people living there, and they just made a living planting corn and selling it. Okay? Now, right north of the border was the United States. We had a huge agricultural business. And what happened is, when we went off the gold standard, the boys in Washington, D.C. got freaked out of the balance of trade because they thought if the balance of trade went negative, which it did, and it went negative right after they took gold out of the dollar, all right? The trade balance went negative. Their fear was, if we had a negative trade balance, we're going to go to the shitter. Now, what happened? Nothing. All right? We've got the biggest trade imbalance in the world. We owe more money in the world, and nothing happened. That's how stable the system is. But at that time, they were afraid. So what the boys in Washington did is that they subsidized the price of all U.S. agricultural, like corn and wheat, to sell it to the rest of the world. That was one of our major strengths. All right? So they subsidized U.S. agriculture in an attempt to sell our wheat, corn, soybeans to the rest of the world and help the balance of trade, which we'd screwed up because now we took gold out of the system. What happened with NAFTA is that after 1992, cheap American corn, subsidized American corn, flew across the border into Mexico, and all of a sudden, those Indians, those Mexicans living up in the hills, couldn't even make a living. They couldn't compete with a heavily subsidized corn coming in from the United States. They began to starve. And here are these people. It wasn't they wanted to come and have they don't speak English. Okay, they've been down there for centuries. They're Indians. They're not even, they're even more indigenous. What they are is became the dispossessed. Mm-hmm. Down to no way to make a living. They had to sit there and leave their families, leave their cultures, leave everything that was important to them, and head north because they had to provide for the families. This is the cause of illegal immigration. All right? This ball of wax that we're looking at is enormous, Sean.
I know. And can I just say something? This needs to be said because the elite play the long game. And the long game in this case, as I hear you telling me the story, which I know to be true, is that two things happened when those indigenous people had to move off of the farmland. They moved either into big, giant hellhole cities like Mexico City, into these big cities to find work, or across the border to the United States. What do the elite want? The elite want a destruction of our border, a destruction of our sovereignty, and a destruction of our nation from within. So they want open borders, illegal immigration. Another reason it's great that Clinton didn't win is maybe we don't get 1 million Syrians coming over here, 1 million immigrants that she was going to bring in. What do the elite want in the long game? They want Agenda 21, UN Agenda 2030 policies. They want to destroy this country. My question is for you, D.R. Schoon, will Trump help prevent the destruction of the country? Because 2030 is not that far off. That's what we need to find out, and we need to hold his feet to the fire. Will he do the things he promised to do, or is he a puppet?
He's not a puppet. This is the danger of him and his promise. This is, see, when Clinton went and let Bob Rubin into the Democratic Party and sold out the Democrats to Wall Street, all right, the traditional enemy of Democrats, he knew what he was doing, all right? And Bob Rubin made 150, huge amounts of money the next year, and Clinton became president of the United States, which is what he wanted, okay? So when we're talking about puppets, we're talking about who controls who. What you've really got here is you've got a hierarchy of power, but it's in chaos, okay? Now, from my point of view, Donald Trump is not a puppet, not in the sense that Reagan and Clinton were puppets.
Right.
Reagan was just a spokesperson for Wall Street and the CIA, and he said it really well, and he told America, "I'm going to make you great again." This is basically what Trump did. All right, America's a great country. I'm going to make you great again. And he was elected on a platform of a balanced budget. That was his big deal. All right. When Reagan took office in 1992, after 200 years of sovereignty, the United States owed, this is after 2 world wars, our complete debt was under $1 trillion. All right. When he left office, the United States owed $8 trillion. All right. You talk about going back on his promise, but he was loved by Americans. Why? Because they were living off borrowed money. All right. But they loved him. So he could go back on his promise. All right. And the fucking people will still love you. This is what the boys at the top know. They are more cynical than me about human nature. They played with human nature at a very, very high level. Now, the thing about Donald Trump, as opposed to Clinton, Reagan, and all these other yobos that out there that get us excited and get our wet dreams going, is that Donald Trump is not a puppet of these people. If anything, he is a puppet to his ego. All right? This man is very thin-skinned. All right? He just loves attention, and he doesn't even really hate Mexicans. All right? He just said something, and it went nuts. So he kept, because he goes back to it. He learned, he happened upon the sound bites, all right? And he just pushed the sound bites because it kept getting him where he wanted. Now, he has become the president of the United States. This is the man who we got as the president of the United States, all right? Now, he is not, in a sense, a puppet of the banksters like Clinton and Reagan were. Okay, their attachment to power was whatever. It was success. All right, Reagan just liked the adulation. Everybody likes to be liked. Okay, and Clinton was just pure balls up about power. Okay, and this is where they were. Now Trump he's totally different. He's totally different. He came to the fore because the system needed to be disrupted. Okay. It needed to be disrupted. And he is a classic disruptor. But he's a disruptor with basically no agenda, no coherent agenda. You were able to see certain things that he said, you go, fuck, thank God somebody's saying this shit. No one's saying this shit. It wasn't necessarily about Mexico, but he said things about Israel. All right? Nobody likes to talk about that. But now he wants to talk to Bibi Netanyahu. All right? I mean, this guy, Bibi Netanyahu, Israel fucking bombed the USS Liberty and got away with it.
Well, you're preaching to the choir here. Wait a minute, though. Are you saying that, okay, this is a very important distinction. We're running out of time. We need to wrap this up in the next 10 minutes. And there's a couple of other things I want to talk about. But, okay, Israel is a proxy state of the Rothschilds. Clinton is friends with the Rothschilds. She's a Zionist. The Bushes are Zionists. There's all sorts of neocons and Zionists that back Clinton. I guess the question then for you is, what are you saying? Is Trump a Zionist? Is he an anti-Zionist? Is he something in between? What are we getting with Trump?
He's a Trumpist. He is a Trumpist. And that's why you can only trust people to be who they are, Sean, not what you want them to be. Humanity's blindness, either in marriage or in politics, all right, is wanting the other person to be what you want them to be.
Well, let me say this then. If he's a Trumpist, then he does not necessarily possess the Zionist neocon ideology that Clinton had, which will make him a better president in international relations with people like Putin, because he's willing to have a conversation that is not always about Israel first, Israel first, Israel first.
Exactly. There is a chance, but that's all you've got.
Well, it's a better chance than if that witch had gotten in, because with her, we know exactly what she would have brought us. The absolute destruction of this country, the destruction of the Second Amendment, the destruction of the First Amendment. She would have targeted the right alt media, the alternative news media, which includes myself and you. She was essentially a demon spawn. And here's one of the other things I want to ask you about. The Podesta WikiLeaks emails suggest very, very strongly that Podesta and many of his allies and elites at the very top have strong ties to pedophilia and child trafficking, as does the Clinton Foundation.
And listen about pedophilia.
Well, I just want to play this. I'm going to play some video here as we're flushing this out now about this Podesta WikiLeaks, the evil on the left. Okay, there's definitely evil on the right, but the evil on the left, because of WikiLeaks, is laid bare for the world to see. Just read the WikiLeaks. And I'm going to play this video here if I can. I'll probably get a copyright strike, but I'm going to play this video of the end of Clinton's concession speech when she's giving hugs to everybody. And there's a moment, my friend Andy alerted me to this. I watched it live, but I missed this moment. And my friend Andy said, watch this moment at 22 minutes when Podesta comes into view. And they really avoid each other. And then he turns his back on her because she won't make eye contact with him. At the very top, the crimes of these two people are ultimately what brought them down. And I wonder if Trump, here will be the ultimate litmus test, Darryl. Will Trump prosecute these people for their crimes, or will they get off? Because she should go to prison for her crimes. So should Podesta. All right, continue.
Now, I want to tell you something. I don't know what's going to happen. But if we're going to talk about crimes, probably the biggest crime that happened in the United States to this country was during the administration of George Bush, where they lied to us into the Iraq war, all right? And the consequence of that was ISIS, all right? So this whole country, irrespective of it, is filled with crimes of high crimes and misdemeanors, not even just misdemeanors on both sides. The thing about, if you want to talk about the rumors of pedophilia, you ought to go rolling about the first George Bush Senior administration.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. All the way back to the Franklin cover-up and before. These people like
exactly.
Jimmy Savile, the BBC personality, who's close with the Queen of England and her disgusting son.
It's disgusting. It's just among the rich and powerful. What you can expect from Trump is this, all right, is you can expect him to be him. Now, what we do, and as I said, in relationships, in politics, when we're after somebody and we're desperate for change and our need is great, we tend to project on them what we want them to be. In relationships and with politics, in the marriage and in this serving out of their term, you find out who that person really is. There is a huge difference between Trump and those who have gone before. He is not necessarily a puppet. I would trust him that he has disrupted the system, and he did this inadvertently. He played an inadvertent role. He is not as conscious as you want him to be. He is not as focused as you want him to be. He is not as knowing as you want him to be. He is a disruptor. He is an inadvertent disruptor, and he has inadvertently disrupted not only the Republicans, which he did first, but he disrupted and gutted out the Democrats, which he did second. And that's by their own hand, by choosing to go with Hillary Clinton. So you've got the election of Trump disrupting the political system in the United States, a system that needs to be healed. It is a broken system. We're going through an extraordinary paradigm change. But I would say is this, just like in relationships, that person that you want him to be is not who you want him to be. He is who he is. And now in the light of day, you're going to find out who he is.
Yeah.
The disruption that he has caused, may it continue in the system. May good come out of it. But I tell you, the odds, holy shit, Sean.
The odds are slim, huh?
Oh, man!
Well, look, we're going to find out who he is, and it's my hope. Yes, I'm using the word hope. I don't think you have to be naive to be hopeful. I think you can be a cup half full guy despite the destruction of our nation over the last 8 years, since 9/11 and long before, since the Federal Reserve was formed under Woodrow Wilson, if you want to be really honest about when the corruption began in earnest. We're going to find out who he is, and it's my hope that this 70-some, what is he, 71 years old, 70 years old, that this, at this point in his life, an old man who has accomplished everything he ever dreamt about and more. He has more money that could ever be spent in multiple lifetimes. Now stands on the precipice and the cusp of being remembered as somebody who actually did something great and selfless by becoming president and then doing the things that were hard to do. And by standing up to the power and the corruption in Washington. And we're going to find out, is he a man of honor or were we all duped? And I'm hopeful that he's a man of honor and we weren't duped. But I want to say this. If he duped us, he will find the fury of the alt media, the real journalism going on in this country, at his front door. Because those of us who stood in opposition to Hillary so fiercely, which did help him get elected, are going to be pissed if he lied to us. And we will hold his feet to the fire. That is an absolute promise. We will hold his feet to the fire.
Yes. You see, and that's what I want to say about those people, who are the young kids who are rioting about the Trump victory. They're rioting as much against Hillary Clinton as they are about Trump. All right. They know that she sold them down the line. They know that they had a chance of their own systemic disruptor, and she was a system. So from that point of view, they've got rage on the left, rage on the right. My sense is that we're headed towards more chaos. All right. As the system collapses, there is going to be more chaos. This is a time of great change. And my gut feeling is, and it's just maybe because of my age and my cynicism. I'm 71 and you're younger. All right. And I've been through this mill a long time. I'm not as hopeful.
Well, you're young enough to have run for president. Should have thrown your hat in the ring. I would have voted for you. Come on, Darryl. I guess it's too late now. We needed to raise the money a long time ago to get you in there.
That's right.
All right, I'm sorry. We'll wrap this up, but no, finish. I interrupted.
No, and so. This is at a point in American history that's extraordinary. What happened? This election is extraordinary, and perhaps not for the reasons most people think. And I think it is extraordinary because it is a systemic disruptor, and is a process that's been building. This isn't something that just happened. It's been building for 20 years. All right, and the American people they're upset, but like I say, I want to return to what I started this program with. When you don't know your enemy, your chances of getting what you want are zero. But in this case, they're not zero. I would put it up to 20% because what we did see was a systemic disruptor. Out of the chaos may come a better America. Out of the chaos on both sides of the aisle may come a better America. But it's going to come out of chaos, Sean. I mean, I don't know a lot, but I will state my thoughts on that. It is out of the chaos. So as we go through the chaos, just watch it, step back. We're not in control anyway. We're like those people when Kevin Durant signed with the Warriors and you're an Oklahoma fan, you're going, you motherfucking traitor. We weren't in the game. We're not Kevin Durant. We're not the Warriors. We're not the NBA. But we're so impassionedly plugged into the outcome that we go nuts over what's happening. All I'm saying is this. This is a process that's historic. We are born at an incredibly extraordinary time, far more than we think it is, and it's going to be hell-raising. We've only begun this crisis, and God help us that we come out the other end better than when we went in.
All right. Yeah, amen. Out of the chaos. Well, we will soon find out. As dark as things get, Darryl, the sun rises every day. And,
you're right.
We may as well fight for justice because what's the alternative? The alternative is tyranny.
Give in.
The alternative is change. And, none of us are going to stand for this UN Agenda 2030 crap. And if Trump's an honest guy, he'll help us defeat it too. All right. So, guys, check out Darryl's website. It's drschoon.com. And his YouTube channel, which I know he would really appreciate you subscribing to, is Schoonworks on YouTube. Darryl Schoon has been our guest. Thanks, Darryl.
Thanks, John.
All right, guys, and thank you so much for listening. We appreciate your support at sgtreport.com, the corporate propaganda antidote, and check us out at thephaser.com and thelibertymill.com. Real news 24/7. God bless.
The Clinton machine is at the center of this power structure. We've seen this firsthand in the WikiLeaks documents, in which Hillary Clinton meets in secret with international banks to plot the destruction of U.S. sovereignty.